Hi, everyone. Jim here with a quick update before we get started. Last week, we talked about the Norwegian fjords, and I wondered if the small village of Flum was still as spectacular today as it was nearly 50 years ago. Well, one of our viewers, Marianne from Ohio, was kind enough to write in with a little update. Here's what she wrote. A few years ago, I was in Flum and took the train from Myrdal, passing those red houses, mountains, and waterfalls. I'm sure it looks the same as when you two were traveling, unspoiled and stunningly beautiful. Thanks for that update, Marianne. It's nice to know some places in the world remain largely untouched. For everyone else out there, Binks and I read and appreciate all your comments and suggestions, so please keep them coming. And now, on to Amsterdam.
Tom Bingle, here along with my co-host and co-overlander, Jim King.
Hello, everyone. Or as they say in the city we're about to revisit, hello.
Oh God, what a Dutch accent, Jim. You
Oh,
scared me
thank you.
there.
Thank you.
But you gave it away. Today we're going to talk about Amsterdam.
Yes, we were really looking forward to getting to Amsterdam, weren't
Oh,
we?
Jimmy, we sure were. We had heard from so many backpackers and many
Yeah.
travelers that the city is just so unique. Like no other European city. It's known for its openness too. It seems that every aspect of the human condition. And Jim, the canals, oh dear, they're just so peaceful and tranquil. They're
Yeah.
everywhere and serving for centuries as major arteries of life.
Right. They call it the Venice of the North, although it seems that every city with a canal is known as the Venice of wherever. But it's also known by another nickname, especially among the locals, Mokum, which I'm probably
Mhm.
mispronouncing, but it's Yiddish and it means place or safe haven. And while we all know it wasn't a safe haven for everyone, the nickname does reflect the city's vibrant culture
Okay, interesting.
and its relationship with the Jewish community.
Yeah, right. Well, let's first talk a bit more about that vibrant culture, Doc. My
Okay.
brother BJ, from his backpacking jaunt with some friends, said the same thing. Oh, this is a city of freedom.
Hmm.
This is a city to let your hair down. And it's such a contrast to other European cities with allowing travelers the freedom to experiment with all the vices of the known world and allows the freedom to be who you are.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it felt like we were in the 60s and 70s themes of sex, drugs, rock and roll, without any restrictions.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
amazing. And even though it wasn't
Yeah.
strictly legal, marijuana was sold in specially designated coffee shops. You remember that?
Oh,
Uh,
yes,
you
yes,
know,
very
you
much.
you could get, of
Yeah,
course, you could get just about anything you wanted in the
yeah.
streets, but they set up these coffee shops as a way to separate the soft drugs from the other harder drugs. Because when we were there, the city was in the midst of a horrible heroin addiction epidemic. And
Wow.
I'll never forget walking around Dom Square and being approached by several guys at several different times in
Yeah.
the space of maybe an hour or so by guys selling hash. And they would all
Wow.
say that they'd go hash.
Jimmy, in that. Well, Jimmy,
Yeah.
let's not dwell on the drug culture,
All right.
since, of course, you and I never partook,
Oh,
right?
of course not. Not in Amsterdam anyway.
But Jimmy, hey, no spoiling, Jimmy, no spoilers here, please,
All right.
okay?
Okay. All right. Let's focus on what about Amsterdam affected us most back then and even now. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, Jim, yeah, sure.
All right.
I think I was still kind of dazzled, by Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo, and even Bergen, these Scandinavian cities up there, where they offered such a contrast in lifestyle that I knew back home in the States.
True.
Bikes everywhere, Jimmy, people of all ages, more bikes everywhere, and more people of all different ages enjoying this urban environment. And Jimmy, one thing was definitely we had a visit to the Heineken Brewery. Now, Jim, strictly for the educational
Of
tour,
course. Of course.
trying to learn the art of brewing, that really craft. But Jimmy had ended, with unlimited beer, cheese, and crackers on their rooftop, all before 11 a.m., Doc.
Well, you know, you're kind of making me regret not going. You may recall that it was you and our temporary traveling
Yes,
partner at the time,
yes.
Devrin. who took all that in. So I
Mhm.
do regret that. Not the drinking before
Mhm.
11, of course, but the tour itself. It must have been kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was, Doc. It was very
Mhm.
different, and educational. But you did your usual thing, Jimmy, wandering around, which always led to some interesting
Yeah.
conversations, with both locals and other backpackers. Is that what you remember most, Jimmy, at all?
Well, when I think of Amsterdam, I think what I remember most is that it became the official birthplace of your unique way of
Oh,
of bridging the gap between English and other languages. We were in Dom Square in search of the red light district, remember? And
oh yeah, Jim.
that's where the youth hostel was.
Oh, that's the only reason we'd be looking for the red light
Of
district. Yeah,
course,
the
of
youth
course.
hostel.
But then a couple who I guess looked Dutch was passing by. Do you remember that, Banks?
Oh yeah, yeah, Jimmy, I do, Jimmy, and I just wanted, to help us, find the place and everything. And Jim, in my, just vernacular, I put my arms up and I approached him, and I went and said, "Excuse me," I wanted to make it as clear as possible. Excuse me, do you speak English? And do you red light district know where is? And Jimmy, they responded, yes. Do you speak English? Like Jimmy, they turn out to be Americans.
Well, yeah, that didn't stop you from
No,
speaking broken English to get the rest of the
no,
directions. Oh my God, that was
no.
painful. But
Jimmy.
and you continue to use this
Oh yeah.
a unique approach, in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. But it always worked, it seemed. Once people tried to figure out what language you were speaking. I mean, Scusi, where does that come from?
Jimmy, well, I'll never forget the, I was trying to present it simply, but they weren't quite sure what to make of me,
Oh
Jim. But
Lord,
after
yeah,
that initial shock, Jim, they did give us directions to the red light district. And Doc, it was our turn to be shocked. I couldn't believe it. I thought it would be a rundown part of the city, and we were trying to get Devon to come just so we had another person. It was going to be
yeah.
extremely dangerous. But Jim, it wasn't. It was crowded with people, with cameras, and bikes, tourists of all ages. And all the while, these nearly naked women sitting in windows, looking kind of bored.
Yeah, and the bouncers would get angry if anybody aimed their camera in that direction, if you remember. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, my God, it
Yeah.
was unlike anything either of us, I think, had
Yeah.
seen in
Yes.
any city back home.
Yeah, Jim.
When I look back on that, it made me realize, how sheltered my upbringing was. I mean, not just the red light district, but the whole
Yeah.
free
Hmm.
spirit attitude, the live and let live.
Yes.
The Dutch people that we met on the whole, seemed way more open-minded and tolerant than the circle of Irish Catholics I grew up with. Not that we were intolerant, but yeah, we were intolerant. But anyway, looking back, thank God for that, because I think it was the start of the change in my
Yeah. Interesting, Jim.
overall perspective toward a less rigid, mortal versus venial sin outlook. Not so quick to judge and condemn, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. The other thing about the Dutch, Jim, I just make a comment. They spoke English. I mean, it
Oh,
just seemed
yeah.
like, and it may have been, like English was their second language, and then they had a third language, but it was just, it just that multilingualism kind of, as you said, kind of brought out a little freedom here. Jim, and I think for me, other travelers, interesting, had that same effect on Jimmy. I remember that as we were saying goodbye to Mary Ellen, that's the one we met on the train who was
Right.
traveling with her friend Doug.
Yep.
Jim, she took out a birth control case and popped a pill like she was popping a mint.
Well, maybe it was a
Just
mint, Banks, or maybe an upper. I don't know. See, my freer live and let live outlook in action.
wow, impressive, Doc,
So,
impressive.
all right. So
Wow.
let's talk about the one site we visited that I
Uh,
know really deeply affected us both. Do you want to comment on the Anne Frank house?
yeah, Jim. That was so different than every other aspect of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
No levity here. but yet it was so meaningful for us, Jimmy. We all know the story of Anne Frank, excuse me, thanks to her diary. But to actually visit the house, Jim,
Hmm.
see the hidden annex and the spot where Anne and her family hid from the Nazis. Well, there aren't words to describe the horror. And Jim, for us, being American, we could not imagine, we cannot imagine.
Right.
As a testament to Anne and her family struggle, when I have returned to Amsterdam, Jim, many times,
Yeah.
after this, but the most sought after entrance is not the Rijksmuseum, the Van Gogh Museum, the canal boat rides. No, it's the entrance into the Anne Frank's house.
Oh, oh, that's nice. Well, you can't walk away from that
Yeah.
house without being deeply affected. And what really struck me as I stood
Hmm.
outside that entrance that you mentioned, after the tour was that this 14-year-old girl was shipped off to Bergen-Belsen and murdered in 1945, just 32 years prior to our
Yeah.
visit.
Interesting.
It kind of reinforced that what happened back then can certainly happen again today.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. For me, it made me felt extremely grateful to being an American.
Yeah, me too.
But from the perspective of 50 years later, it really emphasizes, this is a key point, how important it is not to take our freedom and our way of life for granted. Things can change in a heartbeat, Doc.
Good point. Yeah, and one that, my opinion, is especially relevant today.
Hmm. Wow. But I try to keep in mind that quote, Jim, I'll never forget, from the diary that we included in the post. Quote, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart.
Yeah, yeah, it's so
Oof.
sad, so poignant, but it's a good and optimistic note to end on. So let's do that. What's up for next week, Banks?
Oh, a country with a lot of contrast, Jim, and I'm, just following up on Anne Frank,
Hmm.
and multi, it has many different beautiful parts of it, but Germany.
Yeah.
So, Doc, until then, everyone,
Tot
toot
Ziens.
zen. Very
Not
well.
only did we not get it together, we had two different pronunciations. I'm
Yes.
sure I was wrong. Scusi.
Excuse me.